You've seen them everywhere, right? Probiotics for newborns. They're on pharmacy shelves, all over parenting forums, and with so many opinions flying around, it's really hard to know what's best. Are they a helpful little boost for your baby's development? Or maybe an intervention they just don't need? Well, let's dive in and see what the science actually says. I love this quote because it frames our whole conversation perfectly. Just think about that for a second. A newborn's gut isn't something that's broken and needs fixing. Nope, it's a brand new garden, just waiting for the right seeds to be planted at exactly the right time. Okay, so how does this inner garden actually get started? The whole process of developing a healthy community of microbes in the gut, it begins the moment a baby is born, and it's shaped by a whole bunch of different factors. Scientists have a name for this period. They call it the critical window, and they call it that for a really good reason. What happens here doesn't just stay here. The community of microbes that gets built in these first few months and years, well, it's literally laying the foundation for long-term immune and metabolic health. It's a really big deal. So where do the seeds for this garden even come from? Well, they come from all over. The way a baby is born is a huge one. A vaginal birth exposes them to a whole host of their mother's microbes. But it's also about the mother's own microbiome, what the baby eats, their environment, and whether they need any antibiotics. It's this beautiful, natural, orchestrated process. But what happens when that delicate seeding process gets thrown off track? Maybe by a C-section or a necessary round of antibiotics. Well, the evidence we have suggests it can have real, long-term consequences, like making a child more susceptible to things like allergies down the road. And that, right there, brings us to the heart of the matter. If that natural process can be disturbed, shouldn't we try to step in and help? I mean, on the surface, it seems totally logical, doesn't it? We hear probiotics, and we immediately think good bacteria. So, of course, adding more good stuff should be even better for a baby. It feels like we're just helping the garden grow. But is that what's really happening inside a baby's tiny developing system? What are the consequences of manually seeding a garden that already has its own master plan? The research actually paints a much more nuanced picture. Yeah, this is where things get a little more complicated. The research reveals that you can, in fact, have too much of a good thing. So when scientists really looked into the routine use of probiotics for healthy infants, they flagged 4 main points of concern. It turns out just adding a bunch of probiotics doesn't always reshape the gut's ecosystem the way you might think, and sometimes it can have some pretty unintended consequences. Now, this one is probably the most surprising finding of all. Instead of helping the microbiome mature and grow up, adding these huge doses of very specific bacteria too early can actually pause its development. It can kind of lock in an immature state, which stops the natural diverse progression of microbes from happening like it's supposed to. And then there are some pretty significant safety concerns to think about. The probiotic industry, it isn't regulated nearly as tightly as pharmaceuticals are. The FDA has actually issued warnings for preterm infants because of the risks of contamination and, in some really severe cases, sepsis, which is a life-threatening infection. This just highlights that these aren't risk-free supplements, especially for the most vulnerable babies. Okay, so after all of that, you might be thinking probiotics are just a bad idea. But hold on. It's not that simple. It's more about viewing them as a very specific medical tool, not some kind of daily vitamin. Let's be really clear here. The point isn't to say probiotics are bad, not at all. The science is actually pretty clear that their benefits are most significant, most reliable, when they're used to address specific problems, not as a blanket supplement for every single healthy baby out there. And the evidence for when to use them is highly specific. For example, for colic and breastfed babies, one particular strain called L. reuteri has been shown to really cut down on crying time. For high-risk premature infants, certain probiotics can lower the risk of a devastating intestinal disease called NEC and even reduce mortality. And after a round of antibiotics, they can help the microbiome get back on its feet. These are targeted solutions for targeted problems. This quote just says it all, doesn't it? Probiotics are tools, not magic bullets. Think about it. A hammer is a fantastic tool, if you have a nail, but it's a terrible tool for washing the dishes. It's the same idea here. Probiotics are powerful tools for specific jobs, not all-purpose fixes for routine maintenance. So if just adding probiotics isn't the answer for most healthy newborns, what is? Well,
The focus should really shift to supporting the body's own amazing natural processes. Okay, here it is, the bottom line. For the vast majority of healthy, full-term babies, their little bodies are incredibly well equipped to develop a strong, resilient microbiome all on their own. In most cases, they just don't need the extra intervention. So, the best strategy is actually to support the body's natural game plan. This means things like supporting evidence-based birth practices that help with that first microbial transfer, encouraging breastfeeding whenever possible, which provides the perfect custom food for good bacteria, and just fostering a healthy, nurturing home environment.
Which leaves us with a final and I think really important question. Instead of always asking what we should be adding to the garden, maybe the better question is, how can we best tend the soil so that this incredible garden can flourish all on its own?